welcome to the CCDA podcast. My name is Michelle Ferrigno Warren, and I've been a part of CCDA since the early 90s. It's been an honor to serve with the Flourishing Congregations Initiative this last year and a half as one of the coaches. Today, I'm your host for this podcast episode. CCDA is passionate about seeing people and communities experience God's shalom. And one way we are doing that is through our Flourishing Congregations Initiative, or FCI. This is a comprehensive 4-year program designed to empower church leaders to help their congregations deepen their community engagement, enhance their ministries, and contribute to the flourishing of their neighborhoods. Today, Josh Park from Genesis Church in Fayetteville is joining us to share about what they are doing in their church and community and how they are seeing God move. Josh, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.
Well, we are not just wanting to get to know you, which of course we want you to introduce yourself, but we're really excited to hear about your church and then also what drew you to the Flourishing Congregations Initiative. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your church and the FCI program?
Yeah, so my name is Joshua Park. I am the outreach director at Genesis Church. It's a church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it's a relatively young church. We're about 12 years old. And we were started actually as an outreach outpost of a larger church here in Northwest Arkansas. And so from the very beginning, Genesis was launched with the intention of being a community outreach church. And so it has really been a journey of seeing how the church engages with our local community in very real and tangible ways. And our idea really is that we would share the love of Christ with people in a way that is transformative in their lives and in a way that shows them just how loved they are by God and by us, and that we would really be able to walk that out in our relationships with people in the community.
That's terrific. What drew you to not just the Flourishing Congregations Initiative within CCDA, but CCDA itself? And what are you hoping that this intentional partnership is going to achieve?
Yeah, so we kind of had some inside track, especially in the FCI program, because Christina Four, who leads the FCI program, goes to church here. And so when she started telling us about it, it just seemed like a perfect fit, honestly, with what we do and then what CCDA is all about. Just seemed to fit pretty perfectly with Genesis, who we are as a community and who we are as a church. And I would say probably the thing that pulled us the most in this direction was the opportunity to go through some education and some training with people who have experience in it. Everything that we had been doing up until that point was very, kind of building the plane mid-flight and figuring out what we're going to do as we go along. And so the chance to step into a space where we could work with coaches like Michelle and people who have been doing this for a long time and have the experience of what it looks like to engage the community as a local church, for me, in this outreach position was huge, because we wanted that perspective that was bigger than just, what's happening here in South Fayetteville in Northwest Arkansas.
I love that analogy of building the plane while flying. And I want to kind of put a disclaimer because, Christian community development, it never moves totally from not building the plane while flying. That's part of being in community. But I am really glad to hear that it is creating at least a little bit more of a stability and direction while your plane is in flight. So I'm curious to know if there's a really big takeaway that you've had from FCI so far. I mean, you've talked about being connected to some of the coaches and some of the teaching, and that is really good. But I'm just wondering if there's like a big takeaway for not just you, but maybe for your congregation. I know I had the opportunity to be with them this past summer, and that was probably my favorite part about coaching you all, was to actually be on site and see you all in action and worship with you on Sunday. But I'm just curious if in the relationship and even going through conferences that you've had a big takeaway. You can tell too as well.
Yeah, I would say probably for me and really for our whole outreach team and our congregation, the biggest takeaway that we've had is just kind of a constant reminder to listen to the community. It's really easy to step into this space in a unintentionally paternalistic way and to say, we're looking at the community, we're looking at what we see oftentimes as either dysfunction or a lack, and we're saying, what can we bring to bear in order to either repair this or fix this? Or what are our ideas about what this community ought to look like? And it has just been a great constant grounding reminder that that's not our role. Our role is to listen and then respond. And so that part has been really huge, and it has helped us to kind of stay in that mindset. And then I would say, in addition to that, working with Michelle and seeing just the example of open door and what's possible years down the road has been huge. We're 12 years as a church, but I would say really coming of age, especially in our outreach and development stuff. I would say 6 years of really doing this intentionally. And then I would say for me in a leadership role, the key thing that I've taken from working with Michelle in particular has been just the idea of outreach versus development and how we as a church we run five like major kind of flagship programs, and some of them fall into the category of outreach and some of them fall into the category of development. And over the last year, as we've been going through FCI, the biggest thing for us has been really kind of figuring out the identity of those two areas and seeing where we need to invest differently with both of those and approach those in a strategic way that is all centered around the love of Christ and how we show that to our community, but also that has some very specifically intentional approaches depending on which part of it we're engaging in there.
That's really music to my ears. We've had so many different conversations about how often the church and even the church in Fayetteville has a charity mindset, and how you move from just seeing people as targets and doing ministry to and for them, but really moving and shifting to an accompaniment so that you do it with them, so that they can do things by themselves. And so I know that I've really benefited from that conversation as well. And, just to give the listeners a little bit more insight, one of the conversations, or I should say, probably the foundational conversation that we had this past year or so, is that, mercy is a response to a problem and we need to love it. We don't want to stop it. We don't want to minimize it, but that does fit in the outreach, and that is doing things for people. But you want to do justice. And as you move into how do you respond, not just to immediate, but the circumstances, the situation, sort of the streams that brought a person and a whole community to a certain place. How do we look at those and do the justice and the development so that it's not just an outreach or a mercy response? I don't want to minimize loving mercy because we're supposed to love it, but I also don't want to leave the absence of doing justice. So yeah, so that's great to hear. I would probably want to ask another thing. What is the one thing people should know about your church? And then even also maybe some of the things that you're engaging in your community.
Yeah, I would say, Genesis as a church, we are unique in our area in that we're about a 200 member church on a strong Sunday, but we have a very large footprint in the community. Our staff is about 13, and for a church that size, that's a very, very large staff. About a third of that staff functions in an outreach or community development function. And so we almost operate as a nonprofit service provider within a church. And so that's the kind of the spirit of Genesis. If you come here on a Sunday morning, if you come here any day of the week, you will find activity going on. We engage mostly in this community with our unhoused population. Um, it's a recently gentrified neighborhood, and so as that is progressing, more and more people are finding themselves displaced. More and more people are finding themselves not knowing where their place in the community is. And so we've had the opportunity to really kind of be that refuge that people can turn to, and people can still kind of maintain that identity and feel that they're a part of the community by being here. One of the things that CCDA asks, and that we ask ourselves a lot, is if your church closed its doors tomorrow, would the neighborhood notice? And I would say with Genesis, very much so. And that is a testament to our congregation, to the community around us. Fayetteville, as a community, is an incredibly generous community, and an incredibly giving and serving and supportive place. And it's sort of a little kind of bastion of social justice in Arkansas, which is not known for that. And so Fayetteville is known for that here in Arkansas, but Genesis has had the opportunity to establish our identity in that way. And it's cool because any day of the week that you drive by, unlike most churches here in the South, you're not gonna see an empty parking lot. You're not gonna have to wait till Sunday to see things going on here. There is just a hub of activity and engagement happening every day of the week, which I think is pretty great. And I think that that's really where the local church has the opportunity to step into our community and make an impact in that way.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. As you were talking, I just keep thinking about a few things. One is that's good news. It's good news for everyone. And that's really what we're about. The gospel is about restoration, it's about justice, it's about being good news. And then I was also thinking about that passage in Isaiah 58 that, when you set aside intentional giving to the poor and doing the work that we've been talking about doing and beyond, that you get a good reputation, that not only is the work get done, but people look at you and say, and I kind of use the old King James version, you're the repairers of the breach, you're, the restorers of cities and streets with dwelling. And that is really what we're all about, not just at CCDA, but that's what the gospel is. That's what the salt and light in the world is. One of the things that I've really been, when I went, and then as we've talked, been really encouraged by you all at Genesis is you haven't just expanded what you do inside and outside the four church walls, but you are heavy in collaboration beyond the faith community. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about your dynamic, because you're a smaller city and you've got one really big entity in that small city, that not everybody has, for sure. And it has to do with education, just in case you need a little bit of a hint. And then also there are sectors, you've got your nonprofit sector, you've got your for-profit sector, and usually in community development, that relationship is tight. Private sector, I need your money to fund my stuff, and that's sort of like the well that goes back and forth. But often people don't work with the public sector and they don't know how to. And you guys have not just, you've been highly collaborative and you're constantly growing. So I would really love for you to share a little bit about the dynamics of that big entity and how that does or does not impact your work. And then also just the ways that you integrate with the public sector so that you both are able to do the job of meeting needs of neighbors in your community.
Yeah, so Northwest Arkansas is unique, in Fayetteville in particular, in that Fayetteville is relatively small. It's about 100,000 person city, and because of that large entity you mentioned, it grows by about 30% every year. And so we have a swell after the summer, and all through the spring and the fall, we have about 30 to 35,000 people who join us here. And so it creates some interesting dynamics for the people who live here locally, have established themselves. And so there's a really great collaboration there. But then also we have Northwest Arkansas is the hub for Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson. There's very, very large corporate entities that are global entities that are also headquartered here. So for a pretty small place here in Arkansas, it's the center of quite a bit of large scale industry and things like that. And so it creates an interesting environment. And what we say a lot of times in Northwest Arkansas is, you either have money or you're mad about it. And that's kind of the way that the system here works. And So it's not a resource dry place, but what it has been is kind of a resource controlled place. And
Okay,
so learning to,
tell me more on
yeah,
that. That's
well, it is because we have such large entities here who are, and we have, family foundations that are the result of those large entities, all of those being large family controlled organizations. There is a lot of private money here that operates in the public sector. And so that offers a lot of control to those entities. And so what has happened is that over the years, relationships have developed in the nonprofit sector with the profit sector, but it's been very kind of controlled and directed by where's the money rather than where's the need. And what we found in engaging is that that's not necessarily the agenda or the result of those large organizations and entities. It is really the responsibility of those of us who provide services and engage with the community to, like we said earlier, really be listening and then to leverage those resources that are here for the good of our community. And so I would say, in addition to those things, the biggest partnership, engagement, collaboration that we've had is with the city of Fayetteville itself and with the city government. And so we've been able to collaborate and work with them in ways that are pretty extraordinary. We get to run a workforce development program with them that hires people from the unhoused community to do litter abatement, city beautification, park cleanup, those sorts of things, and have really been able to work with them to establish a program that really redefines our unhoused neighbors' place in the community. Rather than just being cared for, rather than just being provided for, they're able to start being a part of solutions in the community, which is really beautiful. And one of the things that I love here is that in Fayetteville, which is kind of known as the uh, kind of liberal bastion of Arkansas, which is an incredibly conservative state, it's not assumed that a church would work well with the government here because that's the reputation. But I have not found a place where the government has really been more welcoming to the work that we do. I mean, it has been a really unique opportunity for us to collaborate with our local civic entities and work in those programs. And so they fund and help us to provide services to quite a few people. And then we partner with them as well in are like we do a winter shelter and some other things, and we are the city's response to those things. So rather than either competing with with a public entity or trying to figure out how to get around that or having that sort of relationship, we've ended up in partnership with several other organizations which are also faith focused, um, being able to really be that city response, which I think is really cool because it brings a sense that when our neighbors are engaging with our programs and our opportunities, they're not just working with our church, they're working with the whole city and they're working with the community at large to take steps forward and be a part of solutions.
Yeah. What are some of the things that, excuse me, the collaboration, not just with the city, because I've been there and I've seen like the kind of diverse stakeholders that all care about the well-being of neighbors and they're coming together and they're really trying to not just think about the immediate, cold winter shelter we need to address. We also need to look a little bit farther down. That's the moving
Mhm.
from outreach to development. And what are some things that are coming up as a result of working together that you are excited about for the future?
Yeah, so one of the coolest things that's happened over the last year that is just beginning to develop is a program called CR2H, which is the Community Response to Homelessness. And it is a collaboration between faith organizations, nonprofit service providers, and the city government. And the also as well now in the last few months, the University of Arkansas. And so we've been able to connect all of those entities, and it has created, just like you said, Michelle, an opportunity to really look at the future and look at where the community is headed And so rather than focusing purely on what's today's problem, maybe it's cold weather shelter, maybe it is an issue with litter abatement that needs to take place in the park, something like that, really starting to shift the focus to long-term strategic solutions. Fayetteville, in particular, and Northwest Arkansas as a whole, has been a draw for people experiencing homelessness, living in unhoused situations. And so, what has happened is that a lot of service providers have popped up, and it's solving the needs of creating more of a comfort in that space. And what's been cool in these collaborations is that we've been able to start looking at what do long term development solutions look like. And so in workforce development programs, we're able to engage people in meaningful, dignifying work, but then also to work with them with case managers and with a local shelter and collaborate with all of those together to create a pathway forward for people so that while they're working, they're not just earning some money, but they are working on, getting their IDs and getting their fines paid down and making meaningful connections with the court systems and landlords and other people who are going to really pave that pathway forward to start moving out of that situation they found themselves in. And so creating a community that has a robust safety net and a really robust kind of sort of a series of on ramps that people can access to either get to employment, get to other forms of development, whether it's education, mental health care, substance abuse treatment, any of those things. As the community starts to come together, rather than being siloed in our individual little purposes, we're starting to see collaborative work where someone who steps into the spaces that we're helping to form, they're not just solving today, but they're starting to look at 6 months, 3 years, 5 years down the road. Where do I want to be? And then as a city and as a collaboration, we're looking at what is this going to look like 6 months, 3 years, 5 years down the road? Are we just creating an environment and a situation where people come here to be a little bit more comfortable living in that situation? Or are we creating an environment where people come here because they know that this is a place where there's hope? They know that this is a place where there's opportunity to start making forward motion. And that's what I think has been probably the coolest part of all of those collaborations. And I could go on and on about the different programs that are popping up, but it would take me all day because there are just so many things starting to come along in those collaborations that are creating. We've kind of moved to this place where we say we want to make it a little bit more difficult to be unhoused in Fayetteville, um, and nearly impossible to stay that way because there are so many opportunities to make forward motion, and it's such a supportive community in that way.
Wow, that's incredible. As you're sharing it, and I'm thinking of the principles of CCDA, really what you're talking about is setting up just the principle of redistribution. It's probably the most often under talked about, but it's also incredibly powerful. And without relationships across sectors and beyond your own organization, it's really hard to redistribute, some of the opportunities to change some of the barriers so that people really can be empowered and developed, etc. So when you think about the FCI program, because that's what really I want to keep focusing on, and I have to remind myself too, because you and I could get off on some really amazing tangents in
Yeah.
some of the conversations that we've had throughout the last couple of years. But I'm just wondering, you have been doing this job for a little bit. And as you have sat at tables, as you've catalyzed some of these groups of people, what's kind of the voice in your head that you bring to it? And you may have already mentioned it, but specifically, being immersed in this FCI, you've been doing CCD training every month from people around the country who have been practicing it for so long. What's the sort of the voice in your head as you begin to go outside and sit at these tables, or I'll even say leverage and negotiate those relationships?
Yeah, I think I would say that the driving thing that keeps coming up, and it is a direct result of our engagement with you, Michelle, but also with just the environment that FCI has created, is that idea that number one, we're not alone, and that's not a failure on our part that we can't do it all. It is by design that we were designed to function in community. We were designed to function in collaboration, and so when you look at, especially with the principles that CCDA operates off of, that church based idea. Um, and so when you take that and you combine it with the idea of redistribution, and you combine it with the idea of relocation and being local to what's happening, um, you start to be a part of the fabric of the community. And what is really cool, I think what impacted me in a huge way at the conference this last year was listening to several of the speakers when we were at the FCI breakouts talk about the neighborhoods that they have worked with for 20, 30 years. And then to hear them come back at the end of their talk and say, this neighborhood I'm talking about, maybe it's South LA, maybe it's, Upper West Side Chicago, whatever that looks like. Um, what we're talking about is neighborhoods that used to exist, because those neighborhoods are no longer in this place where they were. They're now neighborhoods that are flourishing. They're now neighborhoods where the people who we came in to help are now leading the neighborhoods. They're leading those communities. And so I would say the inspiration of that is that we're not the answer. We are a resource. We are able to step into the community and help to guide and inspire and direct. But it is in raising up the leaders within the community and doing that leadership development work that CCDA focuses on so much. And starting to create a community of development within the community where the folks that we work with are able to take the reins on those things. Probably the biggest change we've made over the last year, and it is a direct result of our work with the FCI program and with Michelle, is that we have started to turn over leadership of our programs to people of the community and people who have come up through those programs. And so, like, our workforce development program is now run by one of our first employees of that workforce development program, who, when we met, was living in a tent, was wrestling with mental health issues, addiction issues, all of those things. And by having the opportunity to engage with the whole community through those, is now housed and stable and employed and a leader, showing hope to the other people in our community and saying, hey, if I'm in this place now, then there's the opportunity for you to be in this place. And so it's not these people over here do this good thing and then we're over here being in the community. It's kind of a call to arms from the people in the community to their neighbors and their friends that says, let's go, let's make a change, let's make a difference, let's get engaged. And I would say that is a major shift for us. It had for a long time been a service provider mindset. And through our work with FCI and really with Michelle as a coach, seeing the neighborhood and the community through a different lens. And so the inspiration there of seeing those communities that have been talked about and worked with in CCDA for so long, that those communities are now flourishing communities, is an inspiration to us that says, hey, we're not the answer. We're just here to inspire the answer, because we know the answer to human brokenness is Jesus Christ. And so we can come up with all the clever ideas in the world, but if we keep pointing people there, then they will find hope and they will begin to be the leaders within this community.
That's tremendous. Thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. It's really been a joy to work with you. Thanks for really sharing quite robustly how you are seeing the CCDA philosophy at work in your community. I want to go ahead and just loop back to just the word flourishing. We talk about flourishing in CCDA a lot. Sometimes we'll talk about community well-being. And so as we get ready to conclude our time, I'm wondering if you could share, what does flourishing mean to you? And what do you think it means to your church and community at this point, especially after, a couple of years with the program?
Yeah, so one thing that I think is pretty neat outside of our direct connection with FCI and CCDA, our church, every year our church has like a theme for the year. And for 2026, that theme is flourishing. And so it fits beautifully. Our lead pastor, Jody Farrell, that's been kind of his focus over the last few months. And so as we moved into 2026, that became our focus for the year. And so that's really where we're at all year, is just talking about the idea of flourishing and focusing on that. So for us in our outreach and development area, it's perfect, because when I think of flourishing for our South Fayetteville community that we're a part of, and for Genesis Church, what I see is a community where people are stepping into their purpose and stepping into whatever the thing is that they were created to do. In a big picture sense, all of us were created to reflect the glory of God and to be a part of our community in a meaningful way. What that looks like on an individual level is different for each of the people that we engage. It's different for us. But my idea of a flourishing community is that when that question gets asked of anyone in our community, that they're able to give you an answer. When I say, what does flourishing look like to you? What is your purpose in this community? What is your reason for being here? That it isn't because I have no other choice, or it isn't, because this is where I'm stuck, but that it is, something of purpose that says I'm here because this calling in my life is the way that I can impact the city, is the way that I can impact my neighbors around me. I'm here because I was where my neighbors are today, and I've been able to walk in this direction and to find this hope, and I want to share that with the people around me. And where it's not the, as you said before, Michelle, the charity idea that says I have a resource and you have a need, and how can I take my resource and meet your need? But it is that asset based mindset, kind of, invading the community and getting people starting to think about the idea of, what do I have? What do I bring to the table? And how can I leverage that, not only for my success, but for the success of my community as a whole? And I think one of the pivots that takes place in the mindset of someone who steps into that flourishing life is when I stop asking the question, what can this community do for me? And I start saying, what can I do for this community? And that's the change that takes place in people. And so when I think of flourishing as a whole, it would be a community filled with people who are asking the question, now that I am in a place where I'm living in purpose, how can I be a part of helping the community to flourish? And if you have a community filled with people with that mindset, the possibilities are limitless. And when when you look at poverty as a whole, one of the biggest pieces of it is that it's a brokenness in relationship to God, to my identity, to my community. And so flourishing is the repair of that relationship that says, I'm right with God. I'm right with my identity, who I am, who I was created to be. And my position in my community is one where I see my purpose and I see how I can help to make an impact on my community.
That's
And
great.
so when people start to have that mindset, I think that it has this domino effect that, and I think in Denver, you've seen it. I think with
Mhm.
Open Door, you've seen it, how when some people kind of catch that fire, then it just spreads and it grows.
Yeah.
And that's what I see as kind of the flourishing here, is as the people in the community start to see themselves as parts of the community, not the problem the community has to solve.
Yeah. That's really powerful. Josh, we've never had a conversation quite like this, and I'm just smiling so much because of a couple of reasons. One, it's just been such a great journey together, and I have really, really enjoyed, you know, getting a not a bird's eye view, like a close up view, an intimate view
Hmm.
of just what you all are doing at Genesis and how you're really wrestling with how can we grow individually, how can we grow as a church, and then how can we grow not just in our community impact, but as a neighbor in our community, and with people, etc. So I just wanted to say that it's really been a really great experience for me. I think the second thing too is having been a part of CCDA almost since its inception. I was that young person running around trying to get informal coaching. You go to the right workshop and I remember following Barbara Williams Skinner around like for years. And one time I would sit in the front row and everything she did, I didn't even care what she was talking about. I just really respected her and was kind of informally being coached. I remember her catching me in the hall and she's like, little girl, I keep seeing you. You're like everywhere I am. I said, well, I know where to get good information. And so one of the things that I don't think we talk enough about at CCDA is just how beautiful the legacy is that we get poured into, that we pour into others, and that continues to cycle. And even while you lead, you're getting poured into. So I've learned a lot from you. I appreciate, the relationship and just really grateful for even just the grant and the opportunity to do the FCI program with you and your congregation. Is there anything else you want to say before we go ahead and close?
Yeah, I would just say, for us, we know that we've been called into this community to make an impact. We know that we've been called to share the love and the identity that love of Christ brings to people. We have no idea what we're doing. We are figuring it out every day, and so the chance to step into this program with FCI, with CCDA as a whole, with you, Michelle, has been transformative for us in that we have somewhere, like you said, you were chasing her around trying to figure out what am I supposed to do? How do I do this? Knowing what we're called to and knowing how to do it are two drastically different things. And so for us, it's been very much well, we know what we're supposed to do. We're not sure how to do that or what it looks like. And we get stuck in ruts doing that. And so having your perspective, having the community of CCDA around us to help guide and have that not only close up view, but also that bird's eye view that
Mm-hmm.
sees what we don't see, that's
Yeah.
able to address some of those things. There was an issue that came up as we were moving into the winter, and we're kind of going back and forth with our city about some of the things around our shelter. And I had a very strong opinion about some things, and I brought it to Michelle. And Michelle's answer did not line up with my opinion about things. And I am so grateful that she gave me the answer that she did, because by being able to work through it from the perspective that she had, we've been able to build a significantly more robust response, but also to grow our relationship in ways that are really healthy. And so turning what could have been a pretty significant conflict into what has been a huge relationship builder, that's where that perspective that we're able to get from you all and that support of we're not going it alone. We're not by ourselves. And it's not dependent on us to figure out and solve every problem. And so we are grateful to be able to be a part of CCDA and a part of this FCI program, and to have just really amazing practitioners who have gone before us, like Michelle, who are able to guide us and coach us through this. That's huge. So thank you very much for that.
Well, Josh, thank you. And also thank you for joining us on this podcast. Thank you to everyone who is listening to the CCDA podcast. If you want to learn more about CCDA and get involved or connected with Genesis Church of Fayetteville, check out the show notes of this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. This episode is produced by Sarah Callan in association with Christina Four, and we will be back soon with another episode featuring CCDA practitioners who are committed to seeing people and communities experience God's shalom. We'll see you then.